track at home, our current national debt is $16.5 trillion. So we might have potentially 2 more weeks of a government shutdown before this next major legislative hurdle is upon us, and some folks, at least here in Washington, are guessing that these two will be probably coupled. So I don't know if it's going to last that long. Hopefully it will not, but it might. As of this morning, I don't think either side has started direct negotiations, although the president did announce today that he's invited congressional leaders to the White House to talk about this issue. Since the focus of this webinar is on the defense budget, I'd just like to do a quick refresher for how a bill becomes a law. And for those of you that maybe grew up in the 70s or 80s, you can cue the Fraggle Rock theme here, although I will not be singing this next section. As we all know, the president sends Congress a budget every year. However, this budget is really only a recommendation for how the government should be funded. Congress ultimately holds the purse strings. So after receiving the president's budget, which is usually in February, both the House and the Senate consider their own separate funding bills. And it's only until after both of those bills have passed their respective bills that they are able to negotiate a compromise final bill. Assuming then that both houses can pass the identical bill, that goes on to the president for his signature or veto. Thus far, Congress has not yet passed any of the 12 annual appropriation bills into law for the fiscal year 2014. And as I'm sure you are all aware, the fiscal year 2014 started yesterday on October the 1st. In fact, so far this year, the House has only passed 4 of the 12 appropriation bills, and the Senate hasn't passed any. Since we're focused on defense spending, I'll give a quick recap of where we're at with the Defense Authorization Bill and also the Defense Appropriation Bill. For about the past 50 years or so, Congress has always passed an annual defense authorization bill, and this authorization bill is what sets defense policy and recommendations for defense funding levels, which the appropriators usually follow, although sometimes do not. Ideally, the authorization bill will be passed before the appropriation bill for obvious reasons, although sometimes that just doesn't happen. The House did pass their authorization bill in June of this year, and the Senate Armed Services Committee passed theirs also in June, but it has not come up for a full Senate vote yet. Some of the major sticking points in this year's authorization bills include the sequester, what we're going to do in Syria, Guantanamo Bay detainees, NSA spying, military sexual assaults, and that doesn't even touch the substantive issues of what type of procurement should we have for military systems, what should be the end strength for the different service branches and the troop size, and what we should be giving our service members as benefits as health and pay. All big issues. Some good news, though, on that House authorization bill. AUVSI successfully lobbied for the inclusion of some language that requires the Department of Defense to work with the FAA, NASA, and others to report back to Congress on the progress being made to integrate unmanned aircraft into the national airspace system, and has a few specific provisions that it wants from the FAA and DoD. Hopefully that language will help spur the FAA to meet the deadlines established by Congress in the FAA bill that they passed in 2012. I won't really touch upon this anymore, but if anyone has questions, my contact information is on the screen, and feel free to send me an email or give me a call. Most of my focus as our government relations manager is on the civil integration of unmanned aircraft into the national airspace system. Moving on, just as the Defense Authorization Bill is considered a must-pass bill, so too is the Defense Appropriation Bill. The House passed its version of the appropriation bill in July, and that bill provides $513 billion in non-war funding, which is actually a decrease of about $5 billion from 2013 funding levels, and it's about $3.5 billion below the President's 2014 budget request. The Senate Appropriations Committee passed their version at the beginning of August. Their bill provides more money, which I'll talk about in a second, but their bill has not yet come to the full Senate for a vote. Really, the biggest unresolved issues for all of these 12 appropriation funding bills, including the defense, is whether Congress will be able to repeal the sequester. And the House and the Senate Appropriations Committees have taken very different approaches here. with spending bills by the Senate Democrats, assuming Congress will repeal the sequester, an assumption the House Republicans have not made in their bills, which is why you'll see a funding discrepancy between the two. If they do eventually pass their bills and we do get to conference, all of this will obviously have to get worked out. So, right now it's unclear how Congress will proceed with these 2014 funding bills, but you can always stay up to date on what's happening on the Hill by staying in tune to AUVSI's advocacy news. We put that in our weekly e-brief newsletters, and we also post it on our advocacy news website. The link is in front of you there. But again, feel free to contact me anytime. So that's just my quick overview on what's going on in the Hill. I think, Chris, you're going to get ready for the deep dive.
Thank you, Ben. At this time, Chris Mailey will be up next. Chris is our Vice President of Knowledge Resources here at AUVSI. He and his team have been studying the defense budget in great detail, and he's put together a very thorough analysis that he'll be presenting today. So, Chris, at this time, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Just real quick to start, there we go. The AUVSI's advocacy website can be found just by going to auvsi.org/advocacy or going to the advocacy tab, and you can see a great picture of Ben and Mario and get all types of good information there. So thank you very much for that start, Ben. So my goal over the next 45 minutes or so is to give you the defense budget numbers as submitted by the President. I think Ben did a great overview about the difference between what the President submits and what's actually approved and what Congress does. But looking at the President's budget gives you a good idea of where U.S. defense is looking to invest its dollars. So I'll give you these numbers to let you make your own conclusions about what's going on versus what you hear and rumor about. And that's going to be the first part. In the second part, we're going to do a deep dive, and I'm going to educate you on how these numbers are created and accessed so you can make more informed business decisions now and into the future. And if I go too fast or you're confused on some things, as Lindsay said, we are recording this, and we'll put this up on our website so you can go back and reference this. But I'll put up my contact info. You can ask me any questions you like. So just a breakdown, I'm going to go through our analysis, the big stuff, and then we're going to talk about the budget process and budget sheets. So what's not in here? Sequestration and government shutdown and those implications. As Ben said, there's still a lot of question about how those will be addressed. Other congressional action may happen, who knows. And oversee contingency operations. I'll mention those in the beginnings, but that's funding for Afghanistan. In 2013, I added that in, but there really wasn't much funding that we could identify specifically for robotics, so I left that out in 2014. So here's the background. There's me and some ugly guy in front of me. 8 years as a duty civilian. I was with the Navy. 2 years of that, I was at the Office of Secretary of Defense for Office of Small Business, and did 2 years in the Pentagon with Navy Acquisition N2 and 6. So that's the Navy's Air, Ground, Maritime Unmanned Vehicle Acquisition Office. More background, quick shout out unsolicited to WBB. They have a great course called How Washington Works. And I have some DeLuia certification, but you can check that stuff out at learn.dau.mil, and that's defense acquisition guidelines and exactly how everything works. So I know enough to be a little dangerous, and I'd like to give you as much knowledge as possible so you can have know everything I know. Everything in this presentation, this is just an intro. This is all from me pulling from public documents. If I accidentally pulled anything incorrectly, it's my apologies. And if you're going to use any of this data for your any of the detailed data for business decisions, I highly recommend you go to the original source documents so you better understand that information. And that's what the second half of this topic is going to be about. So let's go right into it. So here is, in theory, the defense budget process. Oh, by the way, if you have any questions, I do have the chat box open, and I'll try to address them as they show up. So just send them either to me, I believe I'm under Chris Mailey, or just send them to everybody, and I'll try to address them. And if we don't get them, we'll try to get them at the end. So here's the annual budget process, in theory. Normally, the President submits his budget in February, and then April through September, Congress debates, makes changes like Ben talked about. In October 1, everything works perfectly, and the next fiscal year begins. Continuing resolutions and government shutdowns. Just FYI, it affects every program differently. So if you're wondering how it's going to affect you, once your program officer, if you have a program right now with the government, once your program officer is allowed to go back to work, connect with him or her, and they'll be able to better educate you exactly how it's going to affect your program. But I was part of several continuing resolutions in my 8 years, and every one was slightly different. Never part of a shutdown, though. So here is the DoD budget, and at the bottom here you can see a link to the budget request. This is from FY 2001 to 2014, and Ben mentioned the President's budget request, the base and overseas contingencies operations. You can see how it's increased from just under $300 billion up to over $500 billion over the last 13 years. So there's been a big increase in defense investment over the last 13 years. So two things I want you to understand from this slide. First is you can see the defense request in 2014. PB is President's budget. So when the President when they submit a budget, they don't just submit for that next fiscal year, but they also give information for the next 5 fiscal years. So with that budget, you can not only understand what's going on in 2014 potentially, but all the way out to 2018. So it's very good. And this is called Future Year Defense Planning, or the FYDP. So when you hear and you're talking to someone and they talk about the FYDP, they're talking about what's going on over the next 5 years. So that's one thing to understand the FYDP. The second thing I want you to understand is those projections aren't necessarily completely accurate. You'll see this first row is the 2013 FYDP of where it was projecting the future years are going to be, and you see a delta as a decrease per year, 2014 through 2018. In general, I only see data for the next 5 years, so I don't know how they got this 2013 budget data in 2013. If you look at this stuff online, they only tell you out to 2017, and I'll only be presenting information out to 2018. But that gives you an idea about where DoD is expecting its investments over the next 5 years. So you'll see a slight increase over base in terms of growth from 526 out to 568. Okay, so two things I want you to understand on this slide. First, in the real world, a dollar is a dollar. So if you put a dollar into a Coke machine, that same dollar works at if you go out to dinner, and it works if you're paying your taxes. So it's called the elasticity of a dollar. A dollar is a dollar anywhere. That's not really how it is necessarily in the government. And this is when you talk to people and they talk about the color of money. This is what they mean, is money is divided into different what are called budget activities. And here you see the list on the science and technology side, or RDT&E side, research, development, technology, and evaluation, of budget activity 1, which is your very basic research, all the way up to budget activity 7, which is your operational system development. And then there's a whole separate set of budget activities, which I don't have here, for when you're in an acquisition program. But I just want to highlight the S&T side here, because in general, if you look at this 1, 2, and 3, here's your research and your advanced technology development. Congress uses this as a sign to see how healthy is DoD's investment and other investments, certainly outside of DoD, but how healthy is the investment in research and development within DoD. And so you see down here the breakdown between 12, the 13 request, and the 14 request, a total of $12.2 million down to just $11.9 million, but still pretty solid. So when people say, you know, we're losing investment in basic research, well, this macro number shows they're doing pretty well in this. And the Comptroller Defense budget only showed out to 14, but you can push this out to 18 if you want to grab the data. So again, budget activity 1 through 7, it's confusing, but you can check out learn.du.mil for more information. And adding up those basic research gives you a basic idea about defense investments in the basics. So let's get into the analysis. So when the President submitted the budget, you get a budget sheet for almost every major program out there. And I'll walk you through some of those sheets in the second half. But basically, I went through all these sheets, tens of thousands of pages, and searched for basic keywords: robot, USV, unmanned, UAV, RPV, UAS, you know, the basics. And in the Excel file, I'll point out, I tell you what I searched for. And so every single program that had that keyword and was robotics related, I collected all of that, put it all in an Excel file, and collected all of the investment monies. And so what you see here is a summation of all those investments that I was able to find. Certainly it can't be 100%, and I'll show you because some programs don't detail on a level that we can add that money in here, but it's still pretty good idea about investments in robotics. So what you see here is what I did last year for PB13 in blue and what I did this year for PB14 in red. And you see in PB13 they expected about $6.5 billion and they projected for 14 about $4.5 billion. In reality, we still dropped as far as total investment, but much less than was the expected drop. So we're just under $6 billion invested in robotics and unmanned systems from DoD in 2014. And you see a slow decline down to about just under $5 billion in 2018, a little bump here from 17 to 18. Frankly, I think this is basically going to stagnate around the maybe $5.5 to $6.5 billion over the next several years. And I'll walk you through, especially with DARPA, as far as why this drops out in the out years. It's just hard to track funding for smaller programs, and I'll show you exactly why. So you see a little bit of a drop here, but I expect it to maintain about that $6 billion mark. And you note that, again, from 2013 expectation for 14 and 2014 actual budget submission, you can see a huge gap between what was expected and what was actually submitted. So expect a gap between what's expected for 2015 and what's actually submitted. Now we are talking about just about $6 billion for this whole investment. If you look at one major program, and we'll look at the Reaper, one major investment in Reaper or Global Hawk could change this higher number or this top number greatly. But I'll walk you through individual programs. So what you care about, you'll know where the money's going to be or set expectations for the money's most likely. Another interesting way to look at the same data is to look at it as far as the percent of the total defense budget. And we talked about here about 527 or so 526 was this year's defense submission, about 526, ramping up about $50 billion over the next 5 years to just under $570 billion. So that blue line is the total national defense request by the President. And then in green is PB13 and red is PB14. And these are these same numbers that we saw on the previous slide, but as a percentage against this blue line. And so you see a slight decline against the total President's budget in each year. But in the end, I expect us to hover around 1% of that total budget. And again, I'll walk through some philosophies on that. Just by departments, the Navy remains the largest investor in defense for unmanned systems and probably the largest investor in unmanned systems throughout the world, in over $2 billion. Then you see Air Force, Army, OSD other meaning DARPA, DTRA, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, and DLA, Defense Logistics Agency, are all part of OSD, but I broke them out because they had specific programs, and their budgets are broken out, so OSD other is kind of wrapped up everybody else. So things like Dyke Weatherington's funding for unmanned air systems, if you remember him from program review speaking, the previous funded Joint Ground Robotics Enterprise funding was located in this OSD line. That's been zeroed out. But so the OSD is kind of that other bit of funding. If we break this out by domain, you can see, as has happened for the last decade, air dominates the investment. But what surprised me over the last couple of years is that maritime now has a larger share of investment than does the ground systems. And you can see that here with red being much bigger than green. Traditionally, when I was in DoD, I was a maritime guy, and we always thought no one liked us at all because we didn't get any investments. And now you're seeing more investment in maritime. But frankly, you're really just seeing less investment on the ground side. My dad's Army, and he said the Army always loses in any type of budget battle, so I guess it's to be expected to some degree. So let me just show you, again, that's the data, and let me just give you a quick snapshot of the detailed data. If you download the Excel file, let's just go to that first. All this is available at the knowledge page, avsi.org/knowledge, or if you go to the AVSI page and click on knowledge, you can see all of our knowledge blogs. We've got lots of good information in here. You can go to check out the budget analysis, and here's the same information I was talking about before in pretty text format. And you can download PB13 and PB14 by clicking right here, and you can get, that will give you this Excel file right here. And what we have here is all the data that we talked about, the organization, the program element number, we'll talk about that in detail, air, ground, maritime, space, payloads, budget activity, again, we talked about that, RDT&E and procurement, a title, and its funding throughout the fit-up. So you can see details about individual programs. And that is available for anyone to access. I have some notes in here just so people have some basics. So like here, Airborne SIGINT, Enterprise, it doesn't really say anything in the title, but it's a SIGINT payload on the Global Hawk, and you can see its investment over the next 5 years. Some good stuff in there. So one thing we did, we have a brand new product called the Unmanned Systems and Robotics Directory, robotdirectory.avsi.org. You should check it out and buy it and use it. It's a big list of details on every robot we could ever find, always being updated. Here's a discount code for you, USRD Web 1013, and it's good through the end of the month if you're interested. What I did for Robot Directory people specifically is I did additional analysis on all the acquisition programs, and here is what it looks like for the Reaper. Is I try to figure out how much procurement there is by year, so you can see total Reaper procurement about just over 400. But Reaper is not just in one line. SOCOM is investing in it, Air Force is buying it. They're also doing modifications on it, and you see some good modification money in the out years. There's also a depot activation, a large amount of money in FY14, so you can check that out. And I did this for all these different programs here in air, ground, and maritime. And for directory subscribers, we'll actually be emailing this out next Tuesday, so you'll be able to check it out then. Just finally finishing it up. So that is the end of part 1. Again, check out avsi.org/knowledge if you have any information. And no questions right now. Excellent. So let's hop right into part 2. So take a stretch, drink another little bit of coffee, because this is going to be exciting as we walk through the budget process and budget sheets. Okay, deep breath on this huge picture. This is how DoD buys programs, or buys or acquires product. In DoD, we just called it the chart, because you can see how long the title is. No one ever says that. They just call it the chart. I don't want to walk through every bit of detail on this, but I do want to highlight 2 areas. Up here is how the programs are actually bought, and down here at the bottom in this row is the execution process. And like Ben talked about, you can barely read it here, but President's budget submits to Congress, and Congress does their thing, and then it gets signed and approved down here, and it walks through the entire planning of the budget. But up here on a specific program, I just want to highlight a couple of these columns. You may have heard things like milestone A, milestone B, milestone C, or post-CDR, whatever that means. But basically what this is through each column, starting on this left side, here's where DoD makes a decision about strategic guidance says we need to buy something to solve a problem. Okay, we need to buy something. We need a material solution. And then that's milestone A, is where they decide, yes, we want to do this and invest in this. Milestone B, you have a prototype, and you're like, yeah, this is looking about right, what we want to buy. And then milestone C, that's where you go, oh yeah, we really want to buy this. And milestone C turns into low rate initial production. Also, you probably heard LRIP. And then full rate production systems called, well, I don't remember what that is, but LRIP is what you hear a lot. In here you have the Systems Engineering V down here, also known as takes a lot of money and time. I was part of some of those. They take a lot of money and a lot of time. And there's some details in here, but again, you can't even read this. It's a little ridiculous. But just to give a basic idea, so when someone says, oh yeah, we're pre-milestone B. Oh, I remember that from the charts. So you can go back to the chart and check it out. And if you just search DoD Acquisition Chart, this comes up. All right. So what I want you to understand from this, and again, I spent 2 years in the Pentagon. It was really frustrating when people didn't understand this. What I want you to understand is when you walk into an office in the Pentagon and you talk to someone, And like, say you've got the greatest thing since sliced bread, or a new slicing or bread slicing widget that works to a skillionth of a millimeter, and it's just perfect, and you know it's going to solve the problem. So you go into the Pentagon all excited with your PowerPoint slides to walk through. Well, right now no one's working because of the shutdown. But once everybody's working again, people in the Pentagon are planning for FY16 right now, so for President's Budget 16. Over the next couple months, the 03, which is Navy lieutenants or an Army, Air Force, or Marine Corps captain, up to 06, which is your Navy captain or your Army, Air Force, Marines colonel, will be meeting with people, or will be determining the basic things that they want to be investing in 2016. And December through January, this December through January, that's where your first flag level, so that's a general or an admiral, will be doing their reviews on what to buy and what not to buy. And then January through March, that's where you get your 1-star through 3-star questions. So if you get a question from the Pentagon between now and March, please answer it as soon as possible, because they're trying to answer a question from probably a 2 or 3-star, and they just need that information. You may only hear from a lieutenant, an 03 lieutenant, or again an Army captain. Don't be insulted by that. Those are the foot soldiers that do all the work. It's like being asked by a staffer. You're not going to hear from the congressman. You're going to hear from the staffer. But certainly those are the guys and the men and women who make do all the tough work. And then March through December, I wasn't high enough a level to see a lot of these reviews, but you have those high-level reviews. And finally, in February, in theory, that President's budget is released to Congress. That's February 2015. And then spring, summer 15, all the executing agencies, O&R and things, they plan out their detailed spending. This is a really weird year because, as Ben talked about, people don't know what's going to happen with sequestration. So talking to people, they may not know they probably don't know what the budget's going to be for FY14. And that's very inefficient, is the only polite way I'll say it, as far as them being able to plan out how they want to invest and develop product for the military. And finally, in theory, October of 2015, FY16 begins. So if you're going to walk into somebody's office in March and be like, I've got the greatest widget, you should fund it in FY15, well, not only have they not, if you're marching in March of 2014, not only are they not going to be able to fund it in 2015, but they're probably not going to be able to fund it in 2016 because they're already way past them. Their money for 2016 is already at the 3-star review. So your expectation should be a 2017 type of investment if you're going to the Pentagon. Certainly your executing agencies, for RDT&E, your O&Rs and all those detail guys, or TARDEX, their money is, they see their money later on, so you still have an opportunity there. But don't expect some magical answer or a quick investment from the Pentagon, even if they're really interested in your product. And again, that actual process is in this chart is kind of detailed down here. It's impossible to read even if you have a big printout of it, but just so you know it is there. All right, so let's go through a single budget sheet. And then I'll show you a couple weird exceptions since we're running quick on time. I only included budget years with data. So when you see the Excel files, if there's a 0 for that year, it means there's no money for that year. If there's just a blank for that year, it means those details aren't given. And if there's a blank, don't assume that that means the money's just ending. It just may be they don't detail that program in time. And I'll give you an example of that. And the pictures and web links that I've done are mine, not DoD's. So DoD will say it's MQ-9. They won't say it's General Atomics. And so I may have messed that up. My apologies. So let's go through MQ-9. All right, so I already have this preloaded, but just so you know, you can just go to comptrollerdefense.gov. Let's just go there real quick, just so you can see the raw data sheets. All right, I don't have this up already, sorry. So here's the Comptroller's office. This first link is the budget materials. And here are the budget materials. If you're looking by service, to scroll all the way down, there's the Army, Navy, Air Force budgets, defense-wide. And you can actually go to previous years if you want to. So if you want to see DARPA's funding, you just do defense-wide since they're OSD. Here's SOCOM, by the way. Here's DARPA right there. So you can see all of DARPA's funding in their out years right there. All right, but we are looking at the MQ9. So just so you know, this weird number right here, PRDTB1, is the budget activity number. I give those for each Excel file. And if you just search that file looking for it, and it's not there, wow, that's because I'm searching in DARPA, not in the correct one. There it is. All right, let's search in the correct one and find this. If it's not here, a little embarrassing. Well, it's not there. All right, well, let's just skip that one, and I'll pull it up while we're talking about another one. So I know this one's here. What I did there is I opened the Air Force other procurement and not the Air Force aircraft procurement, so it's pulling up the wrong one. But Adobe crashed my computer right before we started, so let's get through these other ones and we'll go back to it just to make sure things didn't crash. All right, so here is an RDT&E program. Again, Research, Development, Technology, and Evaluation. This is the big crazy name for it. Right? And we found it there. And it's actually going to be in a couple times before you actually see the budget sheet. So this is a budget sheet. And as you can see, there are 300 pages in this. And there are tons and tons of budget sheets. Hooray. And this one is actually, if you scroll down here, you see page 1 of 17. It's 17 pages long. There's the PE number we talked about, Sensors and Electronic Survivability. This information is in the Excel file. And we are just interested in TS2-Robotics Technology. So there it is, TS2 Robotics Technology. And so you can see its funding FY14 through FY18. You can also see its funding in 13 and 11. And again, the star as 13 says it's part of the President's budget submission in February 2012, so it didn't include sequestration and any other congressional activities. So you have your general PE. You look over here, it says it's RDT&E, and it's at the Army. Budget activity 2, so it's applied research, just like we talked about. And there's a general description about what the program is. But we're interested in specific on, oh yeah, this is a good thing to look at right here, page 2 in general with these. Some budget activity pages or program element pages just have one sheet. Some of them have 20. 17 is actually fairly high. But generally on the second page, if there's been an adjustment, so here you see the FY14 base and previous budget submission versus current budget submission, you see a drop in 7.7. So this is a program cut, and I'll show you another one in the Excel file. But this is a program cut between 2013 and 2014 by $7 million. So if we scroll down, again, we are looking for TS2. So here's H15 right here in the name. Keep going. We're looking for the last one. TS2, Robotics Technology. So here's that same funding here. Again, 15 and 17, so we're still on the right PE number. When you get lost, always check the PE number, and you're going to get lost all the time. It's not the easiest thing to look at. So this funds the robotics CTA for the Army. And there's details about other PEs that there's money here for, and some basics about what they're trying to invest in. And here you can actually see who they're investing in. Boston Dynamics, Carnegie Mellon, Florida A&M, GDRS, and some of the details of programs that they're trying to invest in. So this information is there. So if you were to walk in and talk to the right people at ARL over in Maryland, now you have a better understanding of what funding they have and what they're thinking about for their work. It's not a magical answer, but it gives you a better idea. Again, when you walk into the room and you're trying to sell a product or sell an idea to someone, understanding their perspective and understanding where they are and understanding their money and what they can do with their money and what they can't do with their money is very powerful. And so that's the information you get in these types of budget sheets. So that is a nice, pretty budget sheet. It did have a budget drop. Let's go ahead and look at DARPA, since DARPA is a funny one, funny group. Again, here's their budget activity number right here. Let's open up DARPA and search for the correct one this time. Now, DARPA does have to plan out their budget for several years. By the way, this generically, you can see most of their big program offices are in here. I can't guarantee that, there it is. I can't guarantee that the dollars you see here are connected directly to the program offices, but with the same names, it's probably pretty similar. So Tactical Technology is probably the Tactical Technology Office, TTO. And here we are, so Tactical Technology. And you can see all the money, so you can see they're investing a good amount of money throughout the FIDP, the Future Years Defense Plan, those next 5 years. But we're looking for specifically TT-04, Advanced Land Systems Technology. There it is, Advanced Land Systems Technology. You can see this budget sheet looks the same. They had about a $10 million drop. All right. By the way, here's active. If you're a maritime person, you can see active right here and how much money they invested in previous years and are planning for 14. But that's not the one we're talking about at the moment. TT4, Advanced Land Systems. So here's the Robotics Challenge. If you're part of that program or you've heard of those guys, you know how much they're investing in 2014, or at least was planned when they submitted this budget, submitted this president's budget well over a year ago. Now what's important to this is you can see the land technology money is projecting out to 2018, but this specific program only plans out to 2014. And that's just the nature of DARPA. DARPA doesn't plan out their money too far forward. That they even are able to submit this is pretty good. So you have some information on what they're doing. But again, just because there's no column here for 2015, so don't think that the Robotics Challenge is necessarily going to end in 2014. It's just that we don't know. They haven't exactly said where their money is going. And here you can see what their plan is for 2014, which they've done a great job of advertising anyways. So again, if you remember that drop that we saw, let me just go back to that slide just so we understand what I'm talking about here. Sorry to scroll too quickly. This drop that we see here in 2014 to 2015, well, there's no DARPA program in this 2015 funding line because they don't say what they're going to be funding in 2015. But DARPA's not going to stop investing in robotics anytime soon. All right, let's pull up the correct, well, let's see if we can cheat real quick, just so you know. If you do a program element number and you search for it in Google and do 2014, it may actually come up. ComptrollerDefense.gov, June 2013. By the way, our Excel file also pops up. So let's see if this pops up correctly. No, that's not it. Oh, I've already opened it. Excellent. Now it's a pretty big file, just so you know. These are several hundred pages. So a question from a couple people about their robotics directory while this is loading. This is mods. Interesting. That is not what we're looking for. Yeah. Well, it's not popping up here, so we'll just move on. I assured you it exists in one of the budget documents with the Air Force. I just have the wrong one. So I'll change this in the PDF so you can see the correct file if you want to see the Predator, or the Reaper or the Predator. So questions about the directory. Members of AUBSI get a discount on the directory, but it's not for free. So just check it out and you'll see what the discounts are. All right, and we hit this DARPA. So let's take a look at what a canceled program looks like. And iRobot, if you're on, I'm sorry. Just close your eyes for a second. This is SUGVI, the small unmanned ground vehicle that iRobot was one of the performers for. And you can see here in 2013, again, PB13 you see here, this data was February 2012. Budget Activity 3 for procurement, and there's the PE number, so you can find it. You see a nice, healthy program buying in 13, 14, out through 17, and you see some nice investment throughout those years. And then again, close your eyes, iRobot, but you already know this. This is what it looks like in 2014. So you see 2013, those numbers of 269. 269 is what it was, but all this money for 14 and beyond is just gone. And that's what a canceled program looks like. So knowing the fit up and knowing what investments are planned out in future years is good, but it's not a guarantee that there's going to be money invested in those programs. So that's what a canceled program looks like. And we talked about a program cut once, but we'll point this out on this side. This is an interesting one. Again, I mentioned Dyke Weatherington and those guys over at OSD and their investments. They have their money, and you see 12, they had 24 million, then they had 12 million, now they have 8, and they're going to be down to 4 million, which is disappointing. The Pentagon, money is power, so they're losing a good amount of funding. Of note in here, by the way, they talk about where their funding is going. FY 2014 President's budget transfers 83.169 million through the fit up of the above to the above PE, so they detail where some of that money is going, which is good, so it's not disappearing. And here you see 17 million of that in the FY14 base, so the rest is throughout the fit up. So in good news, it's not necessarily a cut because the money, I mean, it's a cut to the OSD line, but the money's being invested elsewhere. It's not good because in some ways this money was protected specifically for UAS common development, and you had a champion who had this money to invest in this. Now those go to specific program lines, and so the money for BAMs or Sky Warrior, now it's somebody whose focus is on BAMs and everything it has to do involved in BAMs, of which common development is only one of those interest areas. So that may be not the top priority for them, whereas it was the top priority for OSD. So money was moved in some ways, but it's still much more in danger on that side. All right, so again, procurement programs by domain, we outline them in the Excel file. Here they are by service. Again, Navy being the heavy investor in robotics, which is great. All right, so again, back to the directory, discount code USRD Web 1013, good through the end of the month. You can check on the link and look at it. And let's walk through that Reaper program sheet again now that you've seen some of the data. I'm sorry I can't pull up the Excel file, but the Excel file actually walks through, the PDF program element setup walks through procurement by year. And we saw how you can see the fit-up funding through 14 through 18. If you remember SUG-V, let's just go back real quick, just since we're not doing this on the, my apologies for having to go back and forth. What you see here, interestingly, on SUG-V, just as an example, is you see on the left here, procurement quantity. You can actually see how much they were trying to procure per year. And then you can see the cost. And some programs in the later sheets actually detail the how much they spend per platform. Sometimes they just do, say, here we see 311, they'll do 269 divided by 311, and whatever that is, that's the gross weapon. That's the weapons cost. Others will actually detail the contract and how much the government paid for it. Now, that may not be exactly how much money the contractor got to sell it to the government, but it does give you a gross idea, or a large idea, of 80-90% about where the money is, or how much the program, how much the robot costs, which, if you're a sensor manufacturer or something like that, may still be of great value to you. So that's where you see the procurement quantity. Here's flyaway unit cost. Different terms are used in different ways. I'm not going to try to generalize. If you want to know exactly what that means, you should really look at that individual sheet, of which I promise it's there. If you look at these sheets for subscribers, by the way, I detail PV1 and 075 for the different investments. So one more thing I want to show you, and then we'll grab a couple more questions. So start throwing your questions out there. We've got 10 minutes. Maybe I can pull up that Reaper program in time. Another cool little website is dtic.mil, and it hasn't been as happy to me lately, but I used to use this all the time in the government, is if you're just looking for a specific program, let's just try it. Let's, do it live, see if it works. So we are looking for PRDTB1. This will search all fiscal years, all budget activity numbers, all services. Sometimes it works better than others, and as you can see here, it does not work. Maybe if we type Predator here, if it'll work. It's hit or miss, but it can be a useful site, and there's no way to really know, but it can be useful sometimes. So again, dtick.mil/descriptive sum. It's not advertised at all. I don't know how I found it magically one day, but it's super secret for some reason. I guess it's government, so it's not secret, but it's just super hard to find, which is classic government. So that's good stuff there. All right, so with that, that's my last slide. I hope you learned something. There's my contact information, my email. Again, we have the discount code for the directory. Let's take a couple of questions. Anywhere to find?
Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
Just a reminder for everyone, if you would like to submit a question, you can do so using the Q&A box. It's at the right-hand bottom corner of your screen. But if you're looking at this in full screen mode, you're going to need to use the toolbar, which is located at the top. So either the toolbar or the Q&A box down at the bottom.
All right, so we have a question on RDT&E procurement budget sheets in XLS. So let's just walk through this Excel file real quick. This is everything, and I have down here by service, so you can see that too. But everything, you can see the funding type, RDT&E, and then funding here, procurement. If you're not familiar with Excel filters here, if we just want to see the procurement, you can actually filter out procurement. O&M is operations and maintenance. There wasn't much funding there, but I grabbed it whenever I could find it. So you can see the RQ4, MQ9, more MQ9, more RQ4. Target drones has good funding here. If you just want to see air stuff, you can filter here by air. If you know your program element number, you can just find it here, which is great. Some things aren't so specific on that side. All right. Next question, would the totals include sensors and upgrades since the totals were computed from keywords? That's a great question, and that's why I put in specifically here about mods. Let's actually go to the Reaper Excel sheet. So for subscribers, not only did I did this in Excel also, and I cut and pasted the information. So here is the SOCOM line, and here they describe in this detail, you can't read this, but it details what they're trying to do here. Here's the procurement line, details the contracts of who they have. And then mods, they actually walk through, and I know this is a huge block of text I cut and pasted, but it walks through all the different mods that were in there. You know what, that may be fun just to pull up since we know we can find that one. Let's see if we can do this. See if it'll come up. No, not coming up there. All right, we'll try one other. See if I got the right one. That's ammunition. That is not the right one. But in the mods, they actually walk through a lot of the programs and a lot of the details on these individual procurements, so you can find out how much, and I believe the Reaper, they detail this, how much the EOIR sensor is on the program. I'm just pulling up Excel sheet to see if I can just find it. Oh, here's the mods. Excellent. If you go backwards, by the way, it tends to find the last sheet. Oh, that's old mods. There we go. Here's some mods. So let's see what we have here. We're going backwards, so I'm sorry if this is confusing. But here you can see different kits, A kits, B kits. They actually detail a lot of the mods. We go back to page 1. They talk about what the different mods are. Here you can see a big list of the different mods that have been done. Here it is in 13, 14 based. OCO, again, is Overseas Contingency Operations. You will not see any of that data in these main budget sheets. That was done separately. And then total for 14, 15, and here they actually detail 16, 17, 18. So you know how many of, I don't know what ASIP 2C is right now, but you know how many they're going to be buying and how much the unit cost is. But ASIP 2C, there it is, Airborne Signals Intelligence Payload 2C. It details that information. So if you're interested in a specific platform, a specific sensor on a platform, I recommend you check out both the platform and the mods, especially for the big programs. You may be able to find that information. All right, so just to recap as far as where you can find this information, if you go to auvsi.org/knowledge right here, here's our main website, and just go to knowledge, it'll automatically, or blog, it'll go to the blog, and if you see our budget analysis, right here you can download the Excel files for PB13 and PB14. We'll change this text. That will include the video of the webinar and a PDF of the Excel slides with correct information on that one program from the Air Force. All right, and I think that is the last question. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks again, Chris. Thank you very much, Ben, as well, for your opening comments. At this time, that will go ahead and conclude our program. So just to reiterate, if you registered for this webinar, you will be receiving a link to the recording, and we will also be making the PDF files available for download. So that information will be coming your way in about 7 business days. So if you don't see it right away, just hang tight, and we will have it for you as soon as we can. Just a couple of other reminders. If you're interested in getting more information about the robot directory, as Chris mentioned, please go to www.robotdirectory.auvsi.org. Tons of information there, very valuable stuff. So if you're looking for that, please visit that site right there. And also, if you're interested in registering for our upcoming webinar in November, which is titled Unmanned in the Arctic, covering wildlife monitoring applications and oil and gas applications with unmanned aircraft, please go to www.auvsi.org/webinar. This webinar was actually scheduled for next week, and we had a speaker scheduling change, and we've had to move it to November 13th. So important date change for that. If you've already registered, you're still fine. You don't need to re-register. If you haven't registered, please go and check it out. It's free for AUVSI members and $39 for non-members. And of course, if you have any questions on today's program or any comments, you can contact us at info@auvsi.org. I do need to note that today's program was copyrighted by AUVSI with all rights reserved. And with that, I'd like to thank Chris and Ben again so much for your participation this afternoon, as well as everybody in the audience. And that concludes our program, and we'll now disconnect. Thank you very much, everyone.